16th of May 2022. You're very welcome back to Real True Education, Not Fake News. It's fairly good weather. There's rain and everything. I mean, it's really growing the grass, jumping out of the ground here now in Ireland. Slightly cold during the morning time, but still it's good. No complaints. Now, this is the finish up on Crystal Radio, folks. And I know a lot of you were disappointed that you didn't hear me using it and putting the Crystal Radio to work. Now, I'm going to just finish off and do the summary because I have achieved most of what I want to do, but not all, and I'll explain that. So what I have is an aerial outside which must be insulated from everything else. It must be insulated. It's about 80 feet, maybe 100 feet long. I have an earth here, and I have the two wires coming in. So you need your two wires like that coming in. And then I have this earphone. Now you can buy these wee earphones. And what I'm going to do for you now is I'm going to put this in my ear, and I have it connected with nothing, just connected across the aerial, or the antenna as they call it in America, and the earth. And funny enough, I'm getting a signal now, and I'll see if it'll pick it up here on the smartphone. But when I touch the aerial, I get a much louder signal. So what you're getting on this is a hum, and that's the frequency of the radio signal. It's not put through a diode or anything. Now, where will I get this? I'm going to just try it now here. There, it's with no fingers on it, right? I don't know if you can hear. Now I'm going to touch it, and it gets much louder when you touch it. Yeah, there's a very, very noticeable loud hum. Now that's all you'll get most of the time. What you do then is you put that through a diode, and a resistor comes into it, as I said, and the diode cuts off half the signal and allows you to hear the modulated signal or electrical wave in your little earpiece. So if you buy nothing, only that, or one or two of them, they're cheap, and just cut the jack off it and connect it to an antenna and a ground, you will hear the buzz of radio signal. And if you touch it, it's far better. My body is way better an antenna than any aerial. And this brings me back to one time I was asked to go up on top of a roof and adjust an aerial, and when I touched it, they got a lovely signal below, and they wanted me to stay up there the whole winter. They didn't understand that. So the thing is, that's the basics of it. Now, I got it to play music one Saturday night, which I believe is Shannonside Northern Sound. It happened to play. The antenna must have been right. I must be near the transmitter. And the following day I came in, and I was after getting a bit wet, as you will in this time of year, and I put it in my ear and I touched it, and I got a football match being broadcast with a male presenter, very, very clear. And the next thing he came on and he mentioned Conor McKenna, and Conor McKenna was sent off from the Derry Tyrone football match due to something he allegedly did, and I heard that on the radio. So I had achieved my goal was to hear something intelligible on a radio I made myself. I was very chuffed about it because my father had them years ago, and I always said I'd try and make one. Now, I haven't completed it, and that's very important, and I'll just talk about that. So you can hear the waves by just buying that little fella. That it has to be for Crystal Radio. I think it's low resonance. It has to be a real weak one. I mean, you'll hear electric fence of this a half a mile away, and that's why I think the resistor is sometimes used to stop it from being overloaded and damaged. But if you have two of them, and just run them between the earth and the antenna or the aerial, you'll hear the buzz, and that is the frequency of the transmitter. And the trick of the apparatus then is to separate those. I'm just going to deal with those now, but I want to explain to you why the frequency can be in millions of hertz, millions of times a second. And that is because a metal object or anything that conducts, just like a piece of metal or whatever, is made up of atoms, and those atoms have particles which revolve around each other at the speed of light. That means that if you put in electrical current here, or the signal they have right where your feet are, and run it right around the world with a wire going around it 50 times, it'll go around 7 3/4 times in 1 second on their feet. That's how fast the speed of light is. Now, you can look that up on the internet. Now, when you put in, if you take a piece of steel like this. We'd say this is a piece of steel, and you put in heat into it, and you heat it and heat it, and it's a dark night. You watch it, you'll see it begin to glow red, and then it'll glow yellow, and then it'll grow hot white. And when it gets very white, it'll melt. And you can know by looking at the electromagnetic light that comes from that piece of steel what its temperature roughly is using your eyes. When you have a radio transmitter antenna, the thing that does the transmitting, electrical power is sent into it, disturbing the waves. And if you crack a wire on a battery, it does the same thing. You disturb the atoms. If I said waves, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. It disturbs the atoms. Instead of the atoms going around each other at the speed of light, nice and quietly, nice and easily, and nice and settled, they suddenly go mad. And some of them kind of jump out, or they create these waves. And that's why the waves are such high frequency, because the atoms are going around the electron so fast. That you won't read that or see that probably anywhere. I'd say I'm the only one in the world ever explaining that. That's why you get frequencies of maybe 7 million or something like that, megahertz, all this stuff. That's why you get this unbelievably high frequency of radio waves, because the atom is flying around, and the next thing they get a disturbance, and they fly out in all directions, and they create waves which, when intercepted on an antenna, convert into alternating current, not direct current, alternating current, changing from plus to minus, or whatever you want to call it, north to south, in response to the waves. If the wave is 2 million per second, then the electromagnetic current will be 2 million per second. And that comes in to on your wire. I have it here. And if you ground that, if it's not grounded, you have nothing really for it to work against, although sometimes it doesn't need a ground. But if you have it grounded for simplicity, there's a little current set up between the two. I showed them in the video already on the multimeter, very slight current, and then you're using that. Now, in reality, in normal radio, you have batteries, and you have what do you call it, an amplifier to amplify and take that signal and amplify it using either valves or semiconductors, triacs or whatever. There's devices for doing that. But in this idea, the idea is that there's enough power in those waves to operate the little earphone. And this is particularly so if you're near the transmitter. And I'm a bit away here. Now, what should be extra? And this is very important, please, to understand. I have shown you the wires coming in, the antenna and the ground. I've shown you the little diode and the resistor, and where to put them. But this is an idea of the thing I made, and I'm still working in progress. You need a coil. You need a coil, and this coil, I think the wire may be a little thick in it. The wire shouldn't be any more than 0.35 to 0.4 millimeters in diameter, and I think this is about 0.6, and it's not working so well. This fella here is designed so I can move it over and back and pick. Now, in theory, when you get this on a certain spot, you'll pick up the frequency of that, because the incoming signal sets up induction in the coil. And there are different varieties of these. We'll not go into it now. And in theory, if you place it, let's say here, you get Shannon-side Northern sound on your earpiece. Now, if only it were that simple, I haven't had that great a success with it. That's the first thing to remember. Now, the second thing to remember is that by right, although they will work that way, if you're near the transmitter, you need a variable capacitor. And this is one out of a radio I had, one of those cassette playing radios, and it's no good. It's too fine. It doesn't seem to work well, and there's no obvious place to put your wires. You know that you'd be at it for a week. I might get going yet. If I could get an old radio, an old transistor with a biggish capacitor, something about that size, a variable capacitor, it would help. Now, where you put that is, you put that between the point here, the takeoff here from the antenna and the earth. And that regulates the flow of electrons through the variable capacitor. Now, if I knew I had it working Midland, I'd make a capacitor. I often made them, maybe we do something like that, out of two-piece roll, like a roll of cling film or tin foil, one inside the other, and a little tin foil on it, and you can make a capacitor. Well, we're not going to go there now. What I will do when I get time, I'll be on the lookout. I might see an owl radio at a variety mart or something, and someone should pick up stuff like that and take the variable capacitor out of it and throw the rest away. But don't throw away old radio sets unless they're kind of modern, unless they're the 80s or that, and take out the variable capacitor. And then when you have the variable capacitor across the two, across your input, plus selecting it here, a selector. You'll see different things there on them on YouTube. You should be able to get a more refined signal. In fact, a variable capacitor without any coil, and their coils are not easy made, should actually work. That's all to be done. It could be a while till I get around to it, folks. Just to understand, look at the videos there online. There's a few good videos on YouTube about the crystal wave radio. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I got across the one point that I wanted to do that I think you won't get anywhere else. There are two forms of transmitting electricity. You can put the power into a wire here and shove the electrons up till they come out at the top, just like a water pipe. The ones that come out on the top are not necessarily the ones that went in at the bottom. They're pushed along, the same as water in a pipe. If you put in a litre at the bottom, doesn't mean it's the same litre that comes out at the top, same water. That's the first thing. The other way is through electromagnetic waves. Nikola Tesla seemed to think he could transmit vast quantities of electricity by these waves. That's nonsense. I don't know where he was coming. He must have been. I know he was wrong on that. I don't know where he got it. He built towers trying to do it. It cannot be done, no matter what anyone tells you. What's done is the electrons in the antenna transmitter are disturbed. They're flying around at the speed of light. They get a bit of a prod, and because they get a bit of an injection of energy, and it's modulated in a certain way, they send out a huge high frequency wave, and that's the same as light. There's an area of science that I won't go into here. Those waves behave in a very peculiar way. And actually, if you look at the two-slit experiment, two-slit, TWOSLIT, online, you will see it there on some videos, that when they're observed, they behave differently than when they're not. I have a theory on that, we won't go into it here. But what happens in the aerial, or the antenna, is the waves, which are a waveform, reach the antenna, they're converted into particles, into tiny electronic particles. They move the electrons in the wire, in the antenna, that cause the electrons to flow. As the energy of the waves is input like that, a little bit of alternating current comes out at the other end, and that is what causes a little bit of movement in your earphone, which is extremely delicate. Not many will tell you that, and that is why. And that is why the frequency can be so millions and millions of hertz, because technically the frequency could be as high as the length of time it takes, a length of spins electrons and neutrons do around the proton in a second. So if they're going around at the speed of light, it must be an unbelievably high hertz as they go around. You don't really call it hertz as they're going around. When you cause them to send out a wave pattern in an electromagnetic field, that has a frequency, and it can be that high because the frequency in the atom is so high, and that's why you get this very loud buzz, and that's what radio is all about. Folks, I've tried to explain it the best I can. That's the thing about my channel. You'll probably find that there's an odd thing on it. You just didn't realize that, but that's exactly how strange it is. It's hard to believe that when you look out and see a crow, that crow is made up of atoms with protons, neutrons, and electrons. And there's no negative of those. They are either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're 1 for hydrogen, let's say, and 2 for helium, and so on. There's no negatives, and that's another point, but that's another day. So, folks, we might be back on something on the crystal radio. We might get a bit improved, and we do a video. But for now, I hope you found it good. I got 830 views on one, and that was a lot. I mean, people had an interest in it. It's amazing. You can never predict what's good or what isn't, or what will get a good reception. But sure, if it applies to you and you enjoy it, what about it? Folks, thumbs up, thumbs down. We'll see you back for something else, and thank you very, very much.